All right, well, chapter 9, boy, it's good to laugh a little bit because we are in the midst still of some horrendous scripture, some horrible stuff that's going on. Last week we did trumpet number 5, which was the first woe. And so this is the part that humanity will be warned against. Beware of what's coming. And so that already took place with the first woe, trumpet number 5. And what was turned loose on humanity with last trumpet? Locusts, all right. Which, anyone want to say what that definitely means? No, okay, so we don't know. But if they weren't actual locusts, which is hard to imagine that they actually were, then really what was unleashed? Demons. So some kind of a demon being that with a really odd description and all that, and it came out like a flood. And so it came up like smoke out of the pit. Remember, Satan was given a key to unlock the abyss and to open that up. There's just some weird stuff in there. Remember, the quote that I gave you that says this is one of the hardest chapters of Revelation. Now, it's easy to read and it's easy to put it in place. It's the 5th and 6th seal, or the 5th and 6th trumpet. That's not complicated. It describes some things that you can just read, and if you just leave it at that, okay, it's just that. But it's hard to really pin that down and say for sure what some things are. So it's not that we can't come up with answers out of this, but we just need to know that it fits God's plan. One thing I hope we do see as we continue this on, especially as we get to the point that we're at now and will be in the next several weeks, is that we don't lose the feeling that God is orchestrating this out in a very timely fashion. And so even though there's a lot of questions and we'd like maybe a few more answers, if we can understand how this began, and I say this by the tribulation period after the rapture, we can kind of understand as the seals were being broken and now the trumpets being sounded, that we just get a feel for this is whatever it is, whatever this is taking place. It's real and it's happening, all right? And so tonight we come up with trumpet number 6, which is the second woe, all right? So this is the second warning or second woe that's happening. Someone describe for me real quick what is a woe mean? What does that mean, woe? Watch out, look out. Also a warning. And what's the warning? Avoid it, okay? How can you avoid what's taking place on the earth? Okay, so remember, and that falls very much into line with what we're going to be talking about tonight. This is still, the reason he gave a warning is just the same reason we give warnings, all right? A warning means something's going to happen, and I'm warning you now. And so if God was just going to do it with no reason to warn anybody, just catch everybody off guard, he could have done that, couldn't he? He could have not had that angel go, however an angel is going to announce to the whole world, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth. If he chose not to do that, then we would have just read trumpet. John would have seen trumpet number 4, 5, 6, and just go right on, and there would have been no warning. So the reason for the woe is very important, that God is warning. And yes, it's for on the outset, it's what's coming. It's like a final warning. It's not the end of the tribulation, but it's like a final warning. What I want to see by that, and I'm almost getting ahead to how we're going to end tonight, I realize that the opportunity to do what Wanda's talking about, to become a Christian, to get saved, it's getting really close to where that's going to be a thing of the past. I'm not saying it's not possible, but now's the time. Really, yesterday, in this setting, yesterday was the time. Before the first woe was the time. When they saw the seals being broke open, those kind of things, all that was a warning. With the rapture, that's a warning. You missed it, and yet so many people won't understand that they missed it. And so realize that God is still working this process out in order to, as many as will, to come to Christ. Yes, Don?
You're talking about the warnings and the purpose for this.
Yes.
It brings to mind the question of what the overall purpose of this type of revelation is for us. And why did Christ give it to us? Was it for us to use today as a tool to try
Absolutely.
Author for the people who are alive after the rapture to
Right.
some of them study to.
And really, we can probably say both. It is for us. Why is there so much interest? If we're not going to be here, what does it matter? Well, it does matter because of who will be here. And so we could put names, not that we judge, but we could put names to people that might have to endure this. Certainly people that maybe those that are on the verge of accepting Christ and they wait too late. Too late to be a part of the rapture, but not necessarily too late to accept Christ. But to miss out on that is just such a tragedy in and of itself. To have to face what they will have to face, because it's not like if you accept Christ after the rapture that God's got your back and everything's going to be good. Even those that are sealed are still enduring some terrible hardships that just get worse and worse. And so yes, it's for us now. It's hard though to kind of see that.
You think there's a likelihood that after the seals are broken that they'll be having a Bible study and going through this, explaining what this...
Absolutely. At least we understand that that's why there was a pause in heaven before he unleashed the trumpet that where he sealed. He stopped and he sealed the 144,000. And he sealed them not just because they were his favorites or anything. They turned to him and he said, you have a certain role to play now in the tribulation. This is the 144,000 Jews. You are to be great evangelists, and that's how they're described. They are great evangelists, and they will reap a huge harvest because in those references that we had already, we've already seen a great, at least 2 occasions, we've seen a great multitude of martyrs that specifically came out of the Great Tribulation. And so it's not just, the martyrs we heard about through, times past or anything like that. These are a specific group of people that will become saved during this, and they become saved. At first, they're not being saved because of Jews, because the Jews at first are buying into the lies, the promise of peace by the Antichrist. And so they're not evangelists up front, and yet there's those being saved. And that's why there's kind of an indication that there's 2 waves of people that get saved. One, the ones that realize the day after, oh my goodness, I missed it. And yes, there will be churches. If you think about that, you think about the Antichrist stepping into a role and calm down, let's have peace and all that kind of stuff, then there'd be churches. And where'd you go? What do you go to? You go to a church or something. So there's churches planted everywhere. There will be people gathered there. A lot of those Revelation movies and stuff will have a preacher to stick around. Not that he stuck around, but he missed the boat. He knew enough to know, oops, I preached it, but I didn't actually put my faith in Christ or something like that. But nonetheless, you say having Bible studies and things. I think up front there will be some that will turn. They'll clear bookshelves of books that can talk, Bibles and all that kind of stuff. That's got to happen. And there's not scriptures I can give you for this, but just an understanding of how it unfolds. There's got to be this time where people are seeking that there's answers to be had there. There's people that just heard it preached a few weeks ago. There's someone that watched on TV but just didn't quite buy into it. And all of a sudden they see it happen before their eyes and they become believers in it. That's before the sealing of the 144,000. Then they get a hold of this reality and accept Christ. And they don't just go around being witnesses. They are powerful, strong witnesses, and many will believe. All right, Nancy?
Kind of with what Don said, and I know I'm old and slow, but are the woes, are they for us now?
No, the woes will happen in the future, and they happen after the rapture, so they're really not for us. In fact, I wouldn't even dare tell someone, oh, by the way, if you find yourself left behind, don't worry, somewhere about halfway through, 2 or 3 years into it, there's going to be some woes, and you hear that, know that no, you don't want to do that. Except before Christ comes. And then after he comes, realize that if you're left behind, you need to turn your heart over to Christ right away, because there'll be some lies being told. Some people will buy into it, but it's going to go from bad to worse in a hurry. And then there's so much that happens before those woes ever happen. So don't let me misrepresent that, because tonight's lesson is one also that kind of shows that the woes, while it's the kind of some of the last opportunity to accept Christ, that's not really what takes place with what we're talking about tonight. Most will not. If they get to this point, and woe number 1 has happened, and now woe number 2, I'm not saying it is too late, but there's not, it's almost more like the punishment is taking place. Let's again go back to, because the scripture makes this reference about Noah and the ark and everything, the judgment on the world previous. Why didn't God just say, Noah, go over that hill, and when you get over that hill, you see a boat. You need to get your family over that. By the way, if you see some people on the way over there, you might warn them, that rain's coming and floods and all that kind of stuff. It didn't happen that way. 120 years, 100 years to build a boat or whatever. There was time of warning, time of preaching, time of example, and people just sloughed it off, yeah, whatever, there's no way, this guy's crazy, I don't believe the message, and then the rain starts coming. People still didn't believe. And the floods began to come. Well, they had local flooding, people still didn't believe. Did anybody, now this isn't the same as the rapture, but did anybody end up getting in the boat with Moses? With Noah? That's a test, No with Moses, and no with Noah. Right? How about you listening? All right. No one got in the boat. All right. Now they perished. So was that a warning to mankind to get in the boat? The delay was, but nobody accepted that. Therefore, the floods were a judgment on the world. Why did he just hate man? No. He hated the wickedness that was there and their unwillingness to repent. So he had judgment. If we're not forgiven by God, then we bear the wrath of God's judgment. There is judgment. All right? God is a God of judgment as well. And so unlike that, we have here where there is a warning. All right? There is some warnings. There's the signs that we see happening about that time. There's the sign of the rapture. There's the sign afterwards. And there's clarity. And if they heed the warning, they're part of that multitude that's described there. When the evangelists turn loose and they'll do the Bible study. But remember, they're getting to the point where they're going to be under the gun themselves. So they're protected by God. They have the seal, the 144,000. And yet, their time is also limited to when it's productive, or when God allows for this time for those that will turn. And so we're making a turn. I hope we understand. We're making a turn where we go, where there's some signs in the heaven, and some people are turning, and the evangelists are doing their work. It's going to take us a few weeks, but really it's a turning point. Once that point turns, there's some significant consequences for the second half of the tribulation. And tonight really starts that part. The second woe is kind of a part of that. What happened with the last one? Did a third of the men die with those locusts and stuff? None of them. They wanted to. Oh, please, just kill me now. Just I can't handle it. They wanted to die, but death eluded them, and so they were being tortured. All right, by the very demons that they had pledged allegiance to and everything, are tormenting man. By the way, and I should have sorted through this. Sometimes I ask a question and I go to digging and I still don't get the clear answer or something like that. It's still up in the air. My understanding here of whether the believers, is it only the 144,000 that are spared this attack, or could there be others that are sealed and protected from this kind of attack? It seems like most of what I'm reading and seeing indicates that the biggest part of what the last seal the last trumpet that we talked about, this torment, is happening on non-believers. So I'm not saying that believers are spared of this. That's what I can't quite get clear answers on. But it is pretty clear that this is a wicked man being tortured by wicked demons. And allowed by God, or call it's like sick them to a dog. It's like, go ahead, demons, do what you do, and they go. And remember, Satan hates everyone. He came to kill, steal, and destroy. Did he also come to love and to be nice and to have favorites and go easy on them? No, there's none of that in his existence. All right, and if it ever seems like it, then he's that angel of light that appears to be light and then turns on you. It's all a wicked plan. And so Satan does nothing but lie and deceive and destroy and all that kind of stuff, and that's what he leads. Remember, they are led by their king. And who is their king? Those demon locusts. Satan, Apollyon, or whatever the names are. Someone brought that up last week. Who was it that looked up the word Apollyon and the rest? Okay, you want to tell us real quick what you're talking about? I can't remember.
It was a personification of destruction. And the definition of personification is giving human-like qualities to an inanimate object.
All right. So you have these, you don't have, it's not, these weren't physical locusts. These weren't just bugs that attacked, all right? But they had faces like men. And so this personification is what Sonny was saying, is this, it had an appearance as though it was like an attack of someone, but these are demonic, evil creature beings, whatever, with a sting that tortured but didn't necessarily kill. In fact, they were instructed you can't kill, only torture. It's the only time we find this torture. So far we've had death to plant life and death to human life, and that's what we're going to find tonight as well. Okay, so let's get on with it, all right? So trumpet number 6 is the second woe. It's verses 12 through the end, which is 21. And does someone read just 21 for us to start us out? Who wants, verse 12, sorry. Verse 12. Yeah, I'm jumping to the end, all right? We're done. Let's close our books. Who wants verse 12? All right. Gene, read verse 12 for us.
The first woe is past, 2 other woes are yet to come.
Okay, now that's just verse 12. Some include verse 12 in grouping with the trumpet that we already did. I went ahead and held on to it for this because trumpet number 5 is over, trumpet number 6 is about to happen, and yet it has that little end verse. By the way, I'll go ahead and give you the answer to that because it's the title for our lesson. Trumpet 6 is the loosing of 4 angels and an army. So we'll see as the verses go down, and if you've been studying and looking ahead, you'll see more about that army. Okay, but 4 angels is your first blank there. So what Gene just read, the announcement is just like the announcement of the 3 woes was a big announcement. The announcement is now 1 woe is past. So how many more are there? 2 woes. We're going to get one of them tonight, and you're not going to see the next woe for a while. So we're going to have another interlude, in fact, the longest pause, if you will. We had that pause when there was silence in heaven. We had that interlude or that pause when he said, wait, because I've got to seal the 144,000. So there's these built-in kind of pauses to the action, if you would. And so we're going to see that, even though you think it's the last 3 trumpets and the last 3 woes. We got the first, and this is the second, the third comes. It doesn't happen that way. We've got a lot that takes place. What Ron will be teaching next week, the witnesses that come in chapter 11. We've got a lot of stuff to cover before we see the 3rd woe. Someone want to do the spoiler alert? What is the 3rd woe? It's trumpet number 7, which we won't get to for a while. And what is trumpet number 7 unleash or open up? The bowl judgment. All right. Now that's where everything I was just talking about, where we need to put that in perspective. Because up to now, even though it's been, we've had famine and we've had war and we've had this thing that causes death and killing and people dying of different things and the water being poisoned and all that kind of stuff. We've had that kind of stuff. But all that is in the context of partial judgment, but also it's building to what's happening right now with this one and before we get to the next woe. But that last woe is really what is entailed in the 7th trumpet is the 7 bowls. And when we'll talk about that, however many weeks it takes for us to get there, the 7 bowls being poured out, that's where we're in a different realm. We're no longer warning people. We're no longer, some are converting. We're not going to see another harvest of souls and all that kind of stuff. That's where that stuff is coming to an end. That is all out judgment and wrath being poured out when we get to the 7th and final woe, 7th trumpet, final woe, and have those 7 bowls. But we got a lot of stuff to cover there. So that's why I bring it up now so that we see that there's going to be this long pause. And it seems like we're going to be talking for a long time about it. But really, we just push that other there as we deal with what happens in the mid-tribulation period. Are we ready? We got 1 verse down. Let's go to the next one, all right? Verse 13, what John saw and heard. Who wants that? All right, to you.
The sixth angel sounded his trumpet, and I heard a voice coming from the horns of the golden altar that is before God.
All right, so John, we've heard John. If we didn't have weeks in between, we would have heard it. Boom! I heard this trumpet, 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 and they're sounding kind of in succession. Most of them we had very little detail. We spent some time talking about it until we got to the last one. We got to the last one. We had a bunch of verses, a lot of details. Now we get to this one. Again, it's a lot of details. It's not just a couple verses, and yet the trumpet sounding and that kind of thing begins like the other ones did. But he hears this voice, not just the trumpet, but then after the trumpet, with the sounding of the sixth trumpet, he hears this voice, and the voice is of an angel. And where is the angel at? Where? By the altar of God. Where have we dealt with an altar before? Okay, the judgment, the bema seat, the judgment seat of Christ. We've seen that, and then just a little bit ago we saw this, probably the same angel do what with the altar? Took the prayer of the saints, took some hot coals, some fire off of that, mixed it together, and did what with it? Threw it down to the earth. And so we see an action there that is just different than the other stuff. It wasn't the actual trumpet being, it was a prelude to that. It was kind of what happened there. And so there's stuff that John is seeing in heaven as well as the stuff that's happening on the earth. And so he hears the trumpet, again the trumpet, but now he hears this voice, and the voice is the angel that's at the altar. The reference to that we talked about was just in the last chapter, chapter 8, verse 3, when we talked about the judgment seat of Christ, which is in the throne room and all that. That was earlier on, but it's still the same. We're still talking about that altar that's before God. All right, so then we get to verse 14, and stuff really begins to happen with this trumpet. Who wants verse 14? Okay, Sonny's got it.
It said to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, release the four angels who are bound at the great river of Euphrates.
All right, just a little bit of details, but unlike some of the other ones, now this angel is given instructions, and he talks then to commands that the angels, the four angels, be loosed. Fill in your blank with the word loose. These angels are going to be loosed. Remember last trumpet we had the keys, an angel giving what appears to be the fallen star, or Satan, the last trumpet. He gives him the keys and allows him, commands him, tells him, allows him to unlock the abyss, and those locusts come out. Now we have an angel that is commanding that they loose the four angels. Now I put angels there, but in parentheses I put demons. All right? So, what's the difference? Okay, a demon is a fallen angel. And so don't get confused when it says angel, that's automatically talking about angels in heaven. We're talking about demonic fallen angels. Were at one time angels in heaven, but now they're demons. They're fallen angels. Now these are four specific designated angels, demons, that after their fall, they were designated for this time, for the time that'll happen in the future, and this time only. One reason we know that even though it uses the word angels, probably none of your translations said loose the four demons. It says loose the four angels. But an angel, a good angel, would not have been bound. God would not have bound one of his good angels and held him, right? This has been now 6,000 years that these demons that have fallen from earth, and I'd even say before that they have been bound for this time. Only four. All right? Yes?
Aren't they part of the group that was on Satan's side when he came against
Yes,
God?
yeah, they're part of that group,
what
and
they meant.
that's why we have to realize Satan fell, and he took a host of a bunch of demons. We know that there's just thousands and thousands, because we had one man that was possessed by legions, plural, of demons, and so that is possible. So there's many fallen angels, there's many demons, but just as we understand that the angelic creation, now I'm going to a whole study of angels because I'm not prepared for that, but we'd have to study, but just as we understand the angelic creation from before the fall, not the fall of man, but before the fall of Lucifer, there was some built-in hierarchy. There were different type angels, archangels, other angels, and for specific jobs and tasks and all that kind of stuff. And we only have names for a few of them, like Gabriel, Michael, Lucifer, and there's a few other names given to some specific angels, but there's types of angels. These appear to be of a type of angel that when they fell, these four specific individual angel demons were bound for this time and this time only. One of the things that it reminds us, the fact that they're bound and now commanded loose. Who's in charge?
God.
God's in charge. Every step of the way. Even when he says, go ahead and unlock this, God's still in charge. Even when the demons are loose, God's still in charge. With what's happening in our day and time, with demonic oppression, possession, attack, spiritual warfare, that's all taken place in our lifetime as well. Always has. Remember, the spirit of the Antichrist has been around ever since as well. And so this is not all new stuff. This is kind of, but there's that kind of stuff activity right now. God's never been out of control. It only happens to the extent of which he will allow it to happen. And for whatever reason he chooses, he does. And so, but it's limited. It's for a time. So even with this, he looses these four. And by the way, when you, just a reminder, as it comes to my mind, as he loosed this flood of demonic creatures, bugs, insects, whatever they were, these creatures, what was the limit placed on them? To torture, not kill. There's another limit. For how long? 5 months. We talked about that last week. So again, God puts the boundaries on what happens. I'll allow this, but I won't allow that. And we've already had the instructions. You're not to harm certain things. We had one where you're not to. Those were also not to harm the grass or the trees and those kind of things. Although we already had a thing like that. They're instructed. They're never allowed to attack the 144,000. They're the only ones that we know are spared these direct attacks that God is allowing and bringing and causing on there. Another reminder is that not only does he allow it, but he uses it. Now, that's hard for us to really come to grips with, but we have to, especially in times like this. He's using it, just like he used the rain to flood the earth, just like he used the Babylonians and the Egyptians, but more so than the Egyptians, the Romans, but to crucify Christ, the Assyrians to take captive God's people. There were reasons why God did that. It wasn't that he lost control or he couldn't He allowed it. And a lot of times it was for discipline / judgment / punishment, not condemnation to God's people, but it fit into God's plan. And he was using unbelieving, heathenistic people here on earth, and he's allowed demonic stuff in people's life as well. It fits into his plan.
Past the scripture writing, he has allowed the Germans to kill millions of
He allowed the
people.
Holocaust to take place. Exactly. He could have stopped that. He could have, but he didn't do it. An evil man did that with evil people and an evil mindset and everything, but he allowed it, and yet through it all, what their attempt was to wipe them off the face of the earth, God says, it ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. And so for all they've endured, they've got a role that is about, well, it's already taken place. And that's part of the reason that didn't happen. So he didn't allow that. There was never that. So they're scattered over the earth for that long of a period of time. Only God can keep track of them and bring them back together to be the nation that they are before our very eyes. And now they're evangelists during this very, very difficult time. But as this stuff is being unleashed, there's not a whole lot, and we'll see that. There's not a whole lot of redemptive purpose for this. This is going to be death and punishment and judgment. Okay, so to fill in the blank on verse 14. Did I already get that? Yeah. They were bound in the Euphrates River. We want to talk about the Euphrates River because that is very significant. I went and brought the map, even though you're probably familiar with this, but realize that this is weird. This is some of that weird stuff, and this is still in that chapter 9. This is the toughest part to think. However, if you boarded a plane, could you go to the Euphrates River right now? Could you? Could you go to the Euphrates River? Sure you could. So, real time, we actually got there. So we have the Euphrates River right here. By the way, who came from around this area? What started here at the Euphrates River? The Garden of Eden. So somewhere in Iraq, that area somewhere around the Euphrates, that's called the cradle. I put it down there, the cradle of civilization. That's what that means. It is the cradle. It's where life began, where the garden was planted and God created Adam and Eve, and then when they were expelled out of the garden, kicked out of the garden, that's where all that happened here along the Euphrates River. Also, this is where Abram came from, right? And he traveled up and over to the land that God would give him, and ultimately He gave him, and then became his family was given all that land, but first they took a little side trip, a little day trip or so for 400 years or whatever. They took a long trip to Egypt, and then were brought back to the promised land. All right, but that all started with Abram and his family around the Euphrates too. So the two biggest things, there's some other significance, but for sure it's the northern boundary of the promised land. So everything south of the Euphrates and then going that direction is the boundaries for the promised land. Which if you do prophecy and look at a lot of things, that has a lot to do with boundaries that aren't current boundaries. But when God gave them that land and gave them the whole land, that's what they'll end up with. See the green circle over there? We're going to be talking about Euphrates River and the old boundaries and all that once again. So the promises made are the promises kept, even though we don't see it to today. But this is where there's a spiritual boundary, a spiritual warfare. So not only is it for the promised land, but it's also the eastern border of Rome, of the Roman Empire. So when we think of the time that John is writing this or seeing this vision, that's the world power, the Roman Empire, and that Euphrates River is that limit. Everything beyond, anybody were doing these studies and hear what's beyond the other side, what kind of people or things are considered on the other side of the Euphrates. And we're talking about the boundary of the Promised Land and the end of the Roman Empire.
Enemies of Israel.
Okay, not just enemies, but they're barbaric, heathenist. I mean, it's like the other side of the tracks times 1,000, right? I mean, that is beyond the Euphrates, all right? So there's a spiritual warfare boundary as well as some land boundaries and some territory. The Roman Empire, remember again, we've said it, is this revived Roman Empire, is the revival of the one world government in the end times, which is being established as these trumpets are being blown. And so that government and everything we have to go back to the old Roman Empire that also again comes to the Euphrates River. Now think about this. As he says, loose those 4 angels that have been bound. Where were they bound? In the pit like the locust demons? No, they've been bound at the Euphrates River. All these years, Abraham's time, Moses' time, Jesus' time, our time, those demons have been bound on that boundary line. It is significant. We don't have to understand all that, but it is significant. He didn't just pick a river. He could have done the Mississippi. He could have done Polecat Creek, whatever. But there's a reason, and God chose that right there, and that's where it comes from. Okay, good question. What does it mean by being bound? All right.
This is an interactive lesson.
That is. Oh yeah, you got to check. I got some rocks to throw. All right. We're going to see when Satan will be bound in the near future on this thing. All right. And so it's and with a chain. So it is not physical. Satan's not physical, so he doesn't need a physical chain. Whatever that is, the key that unlocks the abyss, it's a physical, spiritual thing where they still can't break that barrier, and they're allowed to or they're not allowed to. Apparently these demons were bound like what Satan would be bound, with no chance of being loosed when they fell and were set aside for this. So we'll say for our understanding they were bound with a chain or a rope or something. But because they're not physical, they're spiritual beings, it's something. However God can bind them, He can do it. He created them.
It was a spiritual chain.
That's right. So, we're given a chain to understand that. So just like you would wrap a chain or someone and put a lock on it, they're bound. And there's no escape artist like Houdini, here. They're bound, they stay bound, and for this time only are they then loosed, and we'll see why in just a minute. Okay, so that's the significance of the Euphrates River, although there's probably more. You can find some more there. But that's where it begins. In that location, it's significant because of what follows in the next few verses. So verse 15. All right, you got it, Tammy?
And the 4 angels who had been kept ready for this very hour and day and month and year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind.
All right. So the fill in the blank is they were designed, they were loosed, and what's going to take place is the result will be a killing. They will kill 1/3 of the world's population, 1/3 of mankind. I may get some of this out of order, but for one, realize that we've already talked about 1/3 of this and 1/3 of that and all that kind of stuff. Basically, at this point now that what we're talking, well over half of the entire population of the world has been killed. Now, before that even happened, we had a big portion of the population of the earth go in the rapture. All right, so they're just gone. But then with the horsemen that had come, with the famine, with the killing, the war, with natural causes, all those kind of things, other than that period of time with the demon locusts that they wanted to die but couldn't, the death on the ocean that we talked about, the death by the poisoning of the fresh water, and now this death as well is a third. So we're well over half of the entire population, holding for sure just the 144,000. Now, we know at this point that there are some of those martyrs we talked about a few minutes ago that have not been martyred yet. So they're still alive, all right? So if any of those die, they're protected. They join that group of people. If they're still alive, they will be the people that are alive when we get to the mark of the beast and all that takes place. That hadn't happened yet. So even though, so we got a third of the mankind, the population of the world being killed here. Once again, I kept reading and I just got to, I couldn't quite sort it out whether the third of the population are solely wicked humanity or if that would include these killing those saved people that would then join the host of martyrs, okay? It seemed like the indication I kept getting is basically the third of the population are wicked humanity, just like those that were being tortured. Don't hold me to that, but that's kind of what I was getting or reading, okay? So I'm reading so much trying to get details and answer questions before you ask them, and my head is only this big right here. Okay. All right. Okay, so they kill a third of the population, and now over half of the population of the earth are dead. We can't really even fathom that. So think of what's left and what's going to take place. What still has to take place? We haven't even got to the mark of the beast and all that. We still haven't got to the bowl judgments being poured out, which is for wicked man, not those that have been redeemed out of there. All right, for a reference on there, I can't remember what it says in my head right now. Go to 2 Thessalonians 2, 6 through 12. 2, 6 through 12. Did I give you that reference?
Yes.
Okay, someone read that. Someone's already there. Who's there?
That one is what?
2 Thessalonians 2, 6 through 12.
Got it?
Okay, what does it say?
And now you know what is holding him back, so that he may be relieved at the proper time, for the secret power of the lawlessness is already at work. But the one who now holds it back will continue to do so till he is taken out of the way, and then the lawless one, who will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will overthrow with the breath of his mouth and destroy by the splendor of his coming. The coming of the lawless one will be in accordance with the work of Satan displayed in all kinds of confined miracles, signs and wonders, and in every sort of evil that deceives those who are perishing. They perish because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. For this reason, God sends them a powerful delusion so that they will believe that his lie, and so that all will be condemned who have not believed the truth but have delighted in wickedness.
Okay, so now that brings in a bunch of stuff. We don't need to sort through all that. But that is a reference already that's talking about this stuff, kinds of stuff that's happening. And it happened with the revealing of the Antichrist. And when he talked about it until he's removed and everything, he's talking about the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit was removed with the church, and we talked about all that, but that's a reference there. It's talking about that, but it goes on into this portion of time where men are being destroyed, and what was the reason given? Why are they destroyed? Because not just because of their lawlessness, but because they refuse to believe the truth. And so God says, fine. You've had the warning, you missed the boat, but you've had the warning, and now you're trying to be deceived. I'm going to allow you to be deceived. I'm going to send that deception there because when the truth was in front of you, you refused to believe it. Does any of that hold true for us today? The truth is right here in front of us, and we say, you're just an idiot for believing that. All right? If the truth is there and you refuse, God doesn't say, well, okay, I'm sorry, I'll have to figure out another way for you then, No. We all get the same truth. And we accept or we refuse it. And if we refuse it, we're not guaranteed anything beyond the one opportunity to believe it. At this point in time, we're seeing this destruction. We realize that those that are, this third that are being killed, the people that are being killed at this point, have had more than opportunity to turn and to receive the Christ. And yet, the indication back there in 2 Thessalonians, describing this time and what we're seeing now, it's not happening. So these are being destroyed. They're not converting, and so we have a third of them destroyed. Now, what's doing this? It's not just the 4 angels. So verse 16 tells us about the army that I mentioned at first. Who wants verse 16? Okay, someone else. All right, Steve, you got it. Verse 16.
And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them.
Okay, so the army, this is the army from the east. So we go back to our Euphrates River, okay? So you see the map, and those barbarians that we talked about that are beyond that, now that's just the idea. Now, if I don't lose you on this, I don't know how I can keep from losing you, because it loses me. But just understand, all right, that a description is that those 4 angels, just 4, are loosed from the Euphrates River that have been bound for all these thousands of years. They're loosed not to do, for them to wreak havoc, but for them to lead this mighty army to kill a third of the population. So we've had fallen mountains that are burning, we've had wormwood, the poison, we've had all these different things that are causing deaths and everything. Now we have an army, not coming after us because we're not here, but there's an army coming from beyond the Euphrates River. Now, we've got to wrestle with this, and I'll give you an answer, but I won't give you the answer because it's not 100% clear, but just take it for what it's worth. The army is 200 million. So we heard thousands, 200,000 or whatever. So it's an army of 200 million that are being led by these 4 angels. Are you with me? You know the number 200 million? That's a lot. Okay, that's a lot. All right. There had never in the history of mankind been an active army that large in any of our world wars in the past, and all the Egyptian army, all the Roman Empire. There's never been an army of men that number 200 million. So, if I can confuse you with this, to today, the Chinese boast of having an army of 200 million. They boast of that. Now, who's counting, whatever, okay? But they would say, we've got that. Now, they're not looking at Scripture to say that. They're just boasting that they have. Now, I've been to China, okay? It's just unbelievable, the population of China. So can I believe that? Yes. There's how many billion people there? So what, 1/6 of the entire population of the earth or whatever is in China. And so, is that possible? Yes, it is. I'm not saying that's what this is, all right? But though it never seemed possible, that would be possible for a human army of 200 million. The other thing is, because we know the description we'll have to get into later of Gog and Magog and some things like that, that there's also this idea of a combined army force of perhaps China and Russia. And so there's smarter people than me that can put some things like that together and say, okay, I can see this happening, and it's the cards are right there. We can watch the news tonight and kind of say, oh, okay, I can do something like that. So just know that while it seems it's never happened before, and this is still talking future, that is within reason to say it could be that. But I don't believe it is. Yes?
There was a general talking at our commencement one time. He was talking about the Chinese troops.
Uh-huh.
And I guess he didn't like them either. He said, if all the Chinese all get a step stool, they step up on that step stool, and they all step off at the same time, they throw the earth back.
What was that? Another earthquake in Oklahoma. No, the Chinese step up their pedestal. All right. So that, yes.
These beasts and all that had already destroyed a third of humanity, had it all been destroying some of the people that are coming, that from the area that these people are coming from?
Yeah, that's a good thing, because when we're talking about what China boasts of today, or what Russia, they're building an army. In my lifetime even, I've seen, all kinds of things that I just now getting to figure out politically wise and world power wise and everything like that. But along with that, putting that in the future and saying, okay, this is just talking about an army of men and soldiers coming from the east. China, Russia, but yes, they fall in that same number of people I'm not saying this army, but people are being from beyond the Euphrates. It's on the planet. So a third of the world population is a third of the world population. The starvation, the famine, the war is happening all over the globe. All that is affecting everybody all at the same time. So now that brings into question is, would that be possible in that day and time, here almost close to midpoint of the tribulation, for a army of men to come 200 million strong?
You have to stop and think about the reproduction of people today. How many is born each day? And I know a lot of the people are going to be taken up.
So you look at the population. You look at the population of the earth and how it's mushrooming.
It can actually multiply that great.
Okay, we don't have to count the babies, because let's read the next few verses. All right, verse 17 through the 19. Although I've always heard of this Chinese army and all that, and so we can't rule that out. But listen, who's got it? All right, well, I'm just going to read some lovely verses, 17 through 19, that John now describes this army that is being led by those 4 demon angels, all right, and are headed for mankind to kill a third of them. Listen to the description and try to figure out, is it Chinese or Russian or something different, all right? Wanda?
The horses and riders I saw in my vision looked like this. Their breastplates were fiery red, dark blue, and yellow as sulfur. The heads of the horses resembled the head of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and sulfur. A third of mankind was killed by the 3 plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur. That came out of their mouths. The power of the horses was in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails were like snakes, having heads with which they inflict injury.
Okay. Wow, we just described something kind of like those locusts that had all kinds of features and faces like men and all kinds of stuff. He's describing the army that he sees. And some have and believe that it's John describing, we can't rule this out, it's John describing in his kind of terms things that we can understand better in our day and time of military armament, tanks, or all that kind of stuff, that you could see that as a possibility. So that is a possibility, all right? However, this description seems to be different, and it seems to be more likely that this is a demonic, evil force rather than man and machine, okay?
These fallen angels,
Yeah, demons and everything, yes.
so there's at least 200,000.
Oh, yeah. And so, exactly. And so the numbers there are there on the demonic side as well as the human side, and it's more feasible to think that this is like the locust worm that came out of the abyss. And this is the thing that follows that these are also demonic forces that are coming from the east and are coming as an army, but he begins to describe this. And remember, horses with horse riders. Now, giddy up, up. We're not going to do this with horses, okay? And so he's describing an army, but remember we have the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that obviously weren't, didn't come from Len Owsley's farm, and that kind of stuff. So he sees these images and that kind of stuff. It's not just a symbolic thing. It's really real happening, but it's described like this.
Well, Paul had never seen a tank, so what he has seen is army.
Yes.
What, men on horses with breastplates.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he's describing this army like that.
Exactly. And so you can say that, it's just, John is, yeah. But as John describes this and everything, it's just hard to imagine that he's talking about that kind of warfare, all right? We're going to see in the end times the warfare that is mankind against Israel. It's the kings of the earth and the men that are left coming as a mighty army. We're going to talk about a literal army there. this could be talking about a literal army with weird stuff, all right? It could be futuristic stuff. It could be John just describing in best terms he can a tank that's firing this way and can fire out the back as well. But it's got some weird stuff in it. So listen to the description of this again. So it's horsemen and horse riders, so there's something combination there. But it's also, they've got breastplates, and there's some significance there, but not sure what it means. We fall into that category again of like as. These have heads like as a lion. So they're not lion heads, but they're like a lion head. I don't know what that could be describing, but remember again, when we heard the description of the 4 creatures around the throne in heaven, good creatures around the throne, they had features and animal features and wing features and man face features and stuff like that as well, and they weren't something we can write off and say, oh, that's just a tank or something like that. They were creatures. Well, so these could be these creatures described in these terms. They had heads as of lions. Out of their mouth came fire. Boy, you can watch a war movie or something, you see these planes, firing out of the mouth. You see these fighter planes, I'm talking way out of my league here, that got the little smile in the teeth, right, that look like that, they're just airplanes and all that kind of stuff. All right, but I don't think that's what's happening here.
Verse 18 says that smoke, fire, and sulfur kill
Right.
1/3 of the.
Yes, this is the way they kill, is through the fire, the smoke, and the sulfur or the brimstone, all right? What are those? Fire, smoke, and brimstone. And this is stuff out of hell. This is what the existence of hell is. So could they be bringing these elements with them to destroy? Remember when the abyss was unlocked, smoke came out, and out of the smoke came the locusts, all right? And that smoke covered the sun and all that kind of stuff, and so we already were at a diminishing daylight, and all of a sudden we have darkness based on that, the last thing that happened, the last trumpet, now this trumpet, all right? So if it's men, then it's men in that kind of machinery with that kind of firepower. We can figure that out more so than John would have ever been able to fathom that. However, if we have to understand those locusts to be demonic kind of creatures, and this is a spiritual battle, and this is called on by God, this is not part of that horseman group that was men were killing men. That's already been described, men killing men. And that'll happen at the end as well. So this is very, more than likely, this is a demonic army. All right, so can't say we prove it. That's why this is out of the chapter that's so hard. Tails like serpents with heads. There again, that's just weird kind of stuff. So he's not describing what the Roman army would have been like in their little chariots that went to the, chased Israel when they left Egypt or something like that. So it's not that, but he's describing what he's allowed to see and able to describe. But it could very well, he would be just as unable to describe demonic creatures such as this as he would our modern military armor. Okay? So we're just going to leave it there because that was so fun. All right, so we're going to go on to verse 20 for the sake of time. And I want to, we don't have time for the group discussion. I was going to give you time to do some group discussion, but you're asking good questions. All right, verse 20 and 21 go together, our last 2 verses, but let's just do verse 20 first. Who wants that one? Okay, Danny, you got that one. Verse 20.
The rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues still did not repent of the work of their hands. They did not stop worshiping demons and idols of gold, silver, bronze, stone, and wood idols that cannot see, hear, or walk.
Okay, that's just in verse 20. It describes these men that are being killed and stuff, what the state, the condition of the world at that time. These men are refusing to turn to God even with this kind of judgment coming. This is still just a second woe warning. Yes, Dan.
This verse, though, kind of leads me to believe that, back to that one question of who was the 1/3 that were killed.
Yes.
Because it said they still did not.
Yeah, and so that's the indication I was getting to. Is that this is talking about the wicked mankind that are now being judged or killed because of that. Yeah, okay, so a good observation right there. So when it describes, it lists the sins of demonic worship, the very demons that are attacking, the attack on the last thing, they worshiped there, and they had idolatry. Man, idolatry has been a thing with God since the beginning. You have no other gods before me. And it describes the exact same thing that's been part of mankind's history. we'll make something out of gold, we'll make something out of wood or stone or something, and we'll worship that image and that. And God says, you're messing with what I've told you not to do. And in the end times, it'll still be the same. They'll still worship things. By the way, in some of the description of that, it even included that it's not necessarily little statues like Buddha statues here, okay? And here's the picture I got when the commentary was describing this. It can also be just what we have made with our own hands. I flew by there, I don't think we saw Dubai. All right, we can talk about that, Tyler, all right? Dubai. Oh my goodness. You look, I mean, they want an island, so they just build an island, build all these fancy buildings. I mean, it's just incredible. Look what man has made. As if we didn't learn the lesson from the Tower of Babel, and stuff. That we can do some incredible things with our hands, and it's never gone. And it's dead. It's inanimate. It can't do anything for us. It can't save us. So while they worship the demons and what they can make with their hands, they're helpless. There's no help in this. And yet they're done. So the first sin is the demonic worship, idolatry, sinners, dead sinners worshiping dead gods. Is the one way one described it. Dead sinners. So this is the wicked that Tamara was talking about. Dead people worshiping dead gods. All right. And then verse 21 ends this lovely chapter and this trumpet with more description of more sin. Who would like to read the final verse? All right. You got it, Betty?
Neither repented they of their murders, or of their sorceries, and not of their fornications, nor of their thefts.
Okay, so listen to the description of mankind then. All right, my discussion question was going to be, we had time. So this is the stuff we're studying in 1 Corinthians that happened 2,000 years ago. Sexual immorality and evil practices and wickedness and all that kind of stuff. So what's the difference between what has already happened, what is happening today, which is so much evil and wicked in the world, and what this is describing? There's a huge main difference. The biggest difference is that the restraining factor has been lifted. The Holy Spirit is what keeps what is being described here, which sounds like what we've experienced in times past, and yeah, we've experienced a little bit. But imagine mankind with the wickedness and the evil that has happened throughout our history, and all the time there's a restraining that God has placed on that activity. And all of a sudden that's lifted. He said, have at it. Have at it. It's what you chose, have at it. Without the church being here, even the 144,000 here had no restraining power to help in that. The wickedness and the evilness of mankind in that day is as bad as all the plagues and the judgment and the demonic things that are coming. The wickedness of man's heart. Remember it described the wickedness of man in Noah's day, not Moses, Noah's day. All wicked all the time. That was wickedness. And yet even then there was a restrainment because God was working out a plan. And so this goes above and beyond. Let me fill in your things right here. Sorcery, by the way, that word sorcery, if yours gave that, by the way, the Greek word for that is pharmakia, pharmacy, drugs. So it's an indication of the drug. Now that's close to our day and time, a description, right? But again, without restraint. Now there's laws, there's regulation, there's, you have to sneak around, whatever, but imagine with no regard of anything to answer for. Warren Wiersbe describes this time. This is the most frightening thing about chapter 9. It's not the judgment that comes from God, but the God sins, but the sin of men that persist in committing even these heinous things, even these horrible things, while God is judging them. And all I could kind of, as an illustration to say what he's saying, this is so minor, but imagine going before a judge, it's just getting ready, you've had your trial and everything like that, you are deemed guilty. Okay, fine, you're guilty. But imagine if someone at that point was allowed to scream and shout at the judge and call him curse words and all that kind of stuff. What if he was allowed to just have 5 minutes behind the bench with the judge or something that's judging him and just give it his life? We see things like that trying to happen, some try to lash out. But imagine that, and that's kind of what's being described here. Here's the judgment of God, and yet they're shaking their fist in his face and just living what they want, even though they're being judged for it without any hope from these gods they worship, with the demons that they've aligned with. or anything like that. It's just devastating. Okay? What a wonderful place to stop. Okay, so we're going to stop there. Now, we just completed woe number 2, trumpet number 6, forget trumpet number 7 for quite some time. Woe number 3, forget that. Next week is going to change the dynamics of what we're talking about as Ron talks, 2 weeks from now, as Ron talks about the little book in chapter 10. We've got chapter 11 that I'll pick up with, and chapter 12. We've got a lot of stuff to come before we ever get back into the mode of what we just talked about. So you take a big sigh of relief, although they don't get it. All right? Let's pray. Okay, what's that? Okay, this brings us to the midpoint of the tribulation. So with the completion of the 6th trumpet, we are at the point with a lot to happen. We're at the point of mid-tribulation. So we're right in the middle. We're right there. All that we've covered is just this first half. I'm out of breath. Donnie, would you dismiss us in prayer, all right? Donnie's going to dismiss us in prayer, and I hope to see you all, please. I'm going to remind this crowd again. This coming Wednesday night, be here for the Life Gate group. It'll be encouragement to them. You'll be blessed. I anticipate a great thing, so I have a feeling it's going to be one of those that we wish we would have pushed harder, but even if it's just decent, I think it'd be great. But even if it's just decent, we'll be encouragement to them. They've done this to minister to the churches in our community. It's going to be awesome, right? So it's going to be good. So be here Wednesday night. Plan for Good Friday service. Easter Sunday coming up. Makes this look, while we were talking about this kind of stuff, with the hope and the wonderful things that we have. Let's pray, Donnie.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to come to your house and study the book of Revelation. The Bible says those who study the book of Revelation will be blessed. Just bless us and keep your hands upon us, dear Lord. Thank you for Brother Mike that he is leading these lessons for us. And just be with us. Help us spread the word, dear Lord, that things that are going to happen, we don't want to be here when it happens. We don't want other people to be here when it happens. Just help us to witness to others, dear Lord, so that we may leave this earth and be with you in heaven before this ever takes place. Be with us next week as we go out in the world and just help us be a shining light for you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.